Reading this morning from the Gospel according to St. Mark, the first chapter, verses 4 through 11. John the Baptizer appeared in the wilderness, proclaiming a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. And people from the whole Judean countryside and all the people of Jerusalem were going out to him and were baptized by him in the river Jordan, confessing their sins. Now John was clothed with camel's hair, with a leather belt around his waist, and he ate locusts and wild honey. He proclaimed, "The one who is more powerful than I is coming after me. I am not worthy to stoop down and untie the thong of his sandals. I have baptized you with water, but he will baptize you with the Holy Spirit." In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. And just as he was coming up out of the water, he saw the heavens torn apart and the Spirit descending like a dove on him. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my Son, the Beloved. With you I am well pleased." Where did you begin? Where did your story, the story of you, begin? Is it a birth story? Did you begin the night you were pressed upon the waves of fierce contractions and forcibly ejected from that dark womb to the light of the world? My sis yesterday was putting some photos on Facebook. Evidently she had nothing to do. But she was going through archives of my mother's photos that she hasn't done since my mother's passing. And several of them I appeared in, and I saw pictures of me when I was a baby with my mom holding me and my sister holding me, and when I first started to walk. And it was kind of neat. It was kind of my birth story. Because I can't really remember what I looked like when I was a baby. And maybe you all can. Did it start, and maybe we shouldn't talk about this on a Sunday morning, did it start in that lusty liaison when your parents were on their own and mixed DNA to make you into a being that you are? Or did it begin further back? Are you part of a great and noble race in some distinguished family tree? Again, my sister has spent years working on her genealogy. I can remember when I was a teenager having to go through cemeteries with her looking for tombstones of relatives all over the place. And eventually she tracked us back that we have some descendants from Ireland and also from Germany. So we have some mixture of us in there. And one of the interesting things is when you sing the national anthem, and they talk in there, there's a fort, and the cannons are firing out of it. I actually had a relative in there, in that fort. So if you trace your genealogy back, you can find some interesting things. Perhaps you yourself are part of some great historical migration that came to this nation from somewhere else, crossing a continent, the Middle Passage, a boat from some island, or maybe you came on a jet and landed in LAX. I think some of us too are not as old as our bodies are. If you follow me very much on the internet, you know that I exercise almost every day, and sometimes I'm in there bench pressing or on the spin bike. I think, either I'm not working very hard, these people next to me are not anyways near as good shape as I am, because sweat's pouring off of them, and I barely have broken sweat yet. And during those times, I often feel like I'm 25 years old, until I look in the mirror and I realize I'm not that old anymore. We also have a gentleman that works out there every day. He's 86 years old. He's been lifting weights since he's 17 years old. And while he's not lifting very much, he still comes into the gym and works out every day. I always tell him when I see him, his name's Don, but I always tell him, I say, "Hey, there's my hero." And at 86 years old, he knows everybody's name in the YMCA. I didn't find out till last week, but he actually has something he typed at home when he meets you. And he goes home and types it and keeps it in his pocket because that helps him with his memory. So he can call you by name. Long before I knew what his name was, he knew my name. He'd come in and say, "Hey, Brooks, how's it going?" I'm like, "Okay." Great. I mean, I knew who he was, but I didn't know who he was. And this time of year, those gyms, the YMCA where I work out, is crowded with people. Everybody's making those New Year's resolutions, huh? I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to get fit, etc. So for them, it might be a great awakening, whether it's their body, or whether they decide they're going to start taking classes in college, or start reading, and enhance their mind, or maybe they decide they're going to go on some kind of a spiritual retreat and work with their soul, or maybe they just now met someone and they want to begin a soulmate, or maybe it's for the first time in their life they've been able to be sober. They said, "I need to change my life. I need to turn my life around. It's a new beginning for me." I think back many years ago, my oldest son, who lives in Ireland now, was ready for bed, and my wife was putting Andy down to bed. He was about 4 years old at the time. And every night, we would read him 3 stories before he went to bed. 2 of them, we would read to him, then we'd make a story up. And my wife asked Andy that night if he wanted to hear a real story about his birth. And Andy said, "No, I don't think so. I'd rather you tell me about the time we got to go to Target and I got to buy some expensive toys." That's a child, right? Beginnings are whatever they are, but they are important. They tell us who we are, and they often tell us where we're going in life. The Bible has a story about the beginning, and some of us know it by heart. Nick read a portion of it to us this morning. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep. And wild wind from God swept over the face of the water. What a scene. Picture that in your mind. God sits down in the midst of this formless darkness. God draws near you the empty waste of the universe. God gazes into the water that would not or could not bear life. And from this face-to-face encounter, a sensible world begins. God orders order out of chaos. What a beautiful beginning. A divine creator who stares down at nothing until there's something beautiful. We say that again. A creator who stares down at nothing and keeps staring until there's something beautiful. Many scholars believe that the stories in Genesis 1 were actually written during the exile of the Israelites into Babylon. What that piece of information tells us that this is really not the oldest story in the Bible, although it's placed first for a reason. I think the reason is that this kind of beginning story is the kind that we need. It's the most important kind of beginning, a story that shows that God is staring down in chaos and making beauty. I mean, we all know there's plenty of times in our life, plenty of times in the world, that it feels like chaos, when we feel ourselves like formless beings trapped in a formless void. We're lost in grief or despair when God seems to be nowhere to be found. In that time when we're desperate for a new beginning, we have this story. We have a creating God who reshapes the chaos of our life, the chaos of the world, into order and into something beautiful. And it begins every day. We'll have a new beginning of our own starting next week when I go on sabbatical, because our regional minister, Rick Splett, who will be speaking next week, certainly invite all your friends and other parishioners to be here to welcome Rick. And then Cindy and Nick will be preaching as well for 5 a total of 5 weeks. And they're really going to be talking about our church, the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And you're going to hear stories about people like Walter Scott and the Five-Finger Exercise, and Barton Stone and Alexander Campbell and Raccoon John Smith and other people on the frontier of the United States creating our congregation. And Elizabeth, we're recording those, so if for some reason you're not here, you'll still be able to watch those on YouTube. I kind of wish I was going to be here, because I'd like to be able to hear these firsthand. But certainly, they talk of a new beginning. We look at these photos here, and we think about how Occupy movements or neighborhood watches and young mothers groups have joined together, and perhaps they've used space in some church to have their things going on. But basically what they're doing is they're gathering to stare into chaos. You know, if you're a young mother, it's your first child, and I know when I'm working at the Y, there's plenty of mommies that are like that. They're scared and clueless. And oftentimes they grew up in Oregon or Maine, and after college they move to the Midwest, and they don't have support systems, and they're scared and don't know how you go about raising small children. If you're a neighborhood watch person, you've grown up in a neighborhood that was safe most of your life, but suddenly all of a sudden it's not safe any longer. And so you organize yourself together in the chaos that's around you to try to shine some beauty into it. Wherever people gather to stare into the chaos, into the void, to feel the reality that exists, but then speak of and create order, we hear the echo of God as the Creator, the one who brought life out of the murky depth. Beginnings are important. They tell us who we are, and they tell us where we are going. One of the mistakes us Christians make, and our culture makes for that matter, when we read the Bible, is we think there's only one story about things going on, when in reality there are often multiple stories about the same thing. For instance, there's more than one creation story, and it's in different order. You know, so if you say, well, no, this is what was created first, you read another story, and that's not the same order that things went. In fact, there are actually dozens of beginnings, not necessarily about creation, but dozens of new beginning stories in the Bible. Maybe hundreds, but they all echo the same theme. Something beginning anew. Because God creates order out of chaos. That's not a bad way to think about the significance of John the Baptist, who appeared in the wilderness shouting and demanding that people rise up to take responsibility for their own lives and for the state of the world. John didn't show up in a world where everything was fine. It was a world scarred and disfigured by oppression of the many, by the few, by state-sponsored violence, by greed, by the exploitation of the powerless by the powerful. John showed up there, standing in the waters of the Jordan River, exhorting people to see the creation, to see the chaos around them, and to make a change, to have a new beginning. And then Jesus wades in next to him. Can you focus your mind's eye on that moment? When you see Jesus wander into the rippling waters of the Jordan River. Jesus standing there looking down and saw his own reflection in the face of the water. It was creation happening all over again. The wind blew down along the Jordan River as John scooped the water over Jesus, and a voice broke the silence. You are my child, with whom I am pleased. And just as before, at the beginning of time, there is now a light in the darkness. God was in the world wrestling with the chaos that existed at that time, This time, he was proclaiming the good news to the poor and release to every captive. God was in the world to speak peace to the strongest army that existed, to feed the hungry as many hoarded their excess, to restore dignity to all those that could not be afforded dignity, and then strip them from others, forgive sins, and free us for love. When John the Baptist and Jesus arrived on the earth, yet again a darkness existed over the face of the deep. But God's Spirit moved on the waters, and God was making order out of chaos. As I mentioned, there's not one new beginning in the Bible. There are many beginnings in the Bible. But they continue to echo that same theme. When the earth was formless void, when God ordered the chaos and made a good creation, when justice reigned in human life, God gave us Jesus to reorder life from the inside out. When the earth was dark and the Savior had been laid in a tomb on the third day, he rose from the dead and once again showed for all time that in all the disorder that exists in our life and in our world, love cannot be overcome. God can remake it. There is no chaos that God's love cannot overcome, not even death.
Amen.
God can turn all chaos into something beautiful. On this day, when we come to Olive Branch Christian Church to refresh ourselves with the promises that we made at the time of our own baptism. And as we do, I want to ask you the question I began with. When did you begin? When did the Spirit of God hover over the chaos in your life and call you by name and deliver you into a good and blessed life? Beginnings matter. They tell us who we are and where we are going. They tell us whose we are. And even who we will meet when we reach the end. As it is in the beginning, is now, and forever shall be, world without end. Amen. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Praise be to God.